I'm Corbett Wall with USDA Market News, here with your weekly feeder and stocker cattle market summary for the week ending May the 2nd. We had feeder and stocker cattle selling $2 to $5 higher again, with many instances as much as $8 to $10 higher. And those instances of $8 to $10 higher, not so much on the real light cattle, as we saw the biggest gains on those big heavy feeders. A lot of steers weighing over 8 and the heifers over 700 pounds. So really strong market for all classes of feeders and stockers again, all the way from the lightest 3-weight cattle all the way up to your cattle weighing nearly 1,000 pounds. But we had a lot of support this week on the board, mainly in response to last Friday's bullish cattle on feed report. And your early week sales really didn't fully realize the market this week, so that bodes well for the market going into next week, because your Monday, Tuesday sales really didn't have time to fully grasp all the support that came along this week. And in your direct trade areas, we saw a lot of trade early in the week, but by the time you saw the gains on the board, your sellers raised the asking prices on those cattle, and it kind of backed your buyers off a little bit. But the stars just keep lining up for this feeder market, and it really doesn't show a whole lot of signs of slacking off. And we've seen it level out over the last several weeks, but now it just seems like we've got another push to take it to yet a higher level. Is you've got demand is still outstanding, your supplies are still really light. It's starting to look like now that our inputs are going to stay moderately priced in comparison to what the cattle are costing or what a pound's worth. So, it's still going to keep going up. And at the same time, your clouds are lining up, as so far our spring rains that we've seen have fallen mostly on the crop ground. And some of the corn's in the southern parts of the corn belt. Further up in the northern part of the corn belt, the corn might not be in, but there's going to be ample moisture there whenever they do get a chance to put it in, and it doesn't take very long to get it put in the way they do it these days. But your pastures are remaining dry for the most part, especially out west. You get west of the Rockies, and there's very few pastures out there that can really support grazing at all, which helps keep your feeder cattle higher. Now you get into the Flint Hills of Kansas, they've had some good rain there. Further south in the plains, not so much. In the northern part of the plains, really haven't had enough warm weather to get that grass going. But there's enough there to kind of get them turned out anyway. It might be slow growing, but pounds are not going to come real easy out there. Guys are probably still going to make some money if they didn't overgraze it too much. But all that still bodes well for your feeder cattle markets. Every producer at every level of beef production is making big money right now when they get ready to sell, and that's just continuing to drive demand. Your feedlots are continuing to backfill these empty pens. Your commercial feedlots have to have a steady supply of cattle going in to keep those feedlots relatively full. We're still seeing good demand from farmer feeders, even though they're in the middle of planting season, because they've still got on-farm storage from last year's crop. They're going to feed that on up. They're not going to sell it at today's prices. They're going to go ahead and feed that up and get that emptied out before we get to harvest this year. But and your guys that are just backgrounding cattle, are kind of putting the cattle together and reselling them. They can just keep the cattle a few weeks, and they're making as much money as what they normally make keeping them a whole grazing season or a whole term in the growing lot. So that's just keeping them, every time they sell a bunch of cattle, they just get right back in and put another set together. At Mitchell, South Dakota this week, on Thursday there, they sold a backgrounded set of fancy steers, weighed 948 pounds at $172.50, weighing just almost 950 there. Fed cattle market this week kind of broke loose Friday afternoon here. Steady to $1 higher in the southern plains at 146. Northern feedlots have not really agreed on a price yet. Regional weighted averages this week in the north central states, an 8 to 900 pound steer cost you $178.41 compared to just $171.84 last week and $133.06 a year ago. Down in the south central states, a 7 to 800 pound steer cost you $182.24 compared to $179.44 last week and $136.39 a year ago. Down in the southeast, a 5 weight steer cost you $208.23 compared to $203.60 last week and $142.85 a year ago this week. That wraps up your feeder and stocker cattle market summary for this week. Check out our website for more market information at marketnews.usda.gov. And from the Regional Market News Office in St. Joe, Missouri, we'll talk to you next week.